This is Sony's AX53 Handycam camcorder, successor to the AX33, one of which I have owned for about a year, and I've been using it for vlogging on my narrowboat channel, Cruising the Cut, and it's been a very good camcorder. But this new model has several enhancements and improvements which I'm really hoping will make it worth my while, and I'll come to those in a minute. Now, as you can see, it is a 4K camcorder, as so many of them are these days. Traditional camcorder style, you know, the old Handycam type thing, not one of these stills cameras that shoots video. I prefer this kind of camera for its ergonomics. I know it's very unpopular these days. Everyone's either shooting on their iPhones or on stills cameras, but I like a good old-fashioned camcorder. They tend to have a better zoom, they tend to have better audio, and for various reasons they just work better for me as a camcorder. So it comes in this fairly compact little box, not a lot of information on it, some logos and so on the back telling you various things it does, like its Zeiss lens and its X-small sensor, and then there's a couple of little highlights here that Sony are obviously fairly proud of. 16.6 megapixels, which if you are a pixel counter you'll notice is fewer than the previous model, but for reasons I will come to, it should actually be better. They're boasting about their clear image zoom. I'm not a fan of clear image zoom, but it is worth noting that the optical zoom on this before you take clear image is double the zoom range of the previous one. 26.8mm wide angle isn't bad for a little camcorder, and it will shoot in HD, not in 4K, up to 100 FPS, or 120 if you're in an NTSC country, which means that when you play it back at the normal 25 frames a second, you get a super slow-mo, and that should be good. I'm fairly sure that I read somewhere, although it doesn't mention it here, that this will also do 4K time lapses, which should be quite cool. And it mentions here it does Ustream, which is live streaming. I can't remember if the AX33 does that or did that. It's not something I've ever used, but something to look into perhaps. Anyway, let's stop looking at the icons on the box and get into the box. Hold on, nope, that way around. At the top, as usual, a certain amount of bump. There's a guarantee document, some accessories, a register your camcorder card, and a little operation guide. This is all in English, and it's basic, you know, plug the battery in, point it at something and press record just to get you started if you don't know how to use a camcorder. So I'll put those to one side. Let's delve in here to the guts of it. That obviously is the camcorder, and then we have some accessories here. Standard UK power socket with the little figure of 8 connector on the end. I don't know what the technical term for one of those is, but it's a fairly standard sort of thing that plugs in to the bottom of that there, and then that end will go into the camcorder. That's to charge the battery, of course. What else we got under here? That's an HDMI, full-size HDMI with a mini HDMI, so that bit will go in the camcorder, that bit can go in your telly, and you can play back your footage on your telly. That's a USB with a little USB on the end. I'm not sure whether you can use that for file transfer, but I believe you can use it for charging the camcorder, and again I'll come back to that subject in a minute. They do include a battery, thank goodness. Not a big one, but it is in there. This is an NP-FV70, which is the same type of battery that the previous model has. 1.96 amp hours, otherwise known as 13 watt hours. It'll probably give you about an hour's shooting, I imagine. That's what these included batteries usually seem to give you with camcorders. Is that it? Yep, that's it. Let's take a look at the camcorder itself. Chuck the box over there. Here it is. First impressions, I must be honest, that it feels ever so slightly a bit more lightweight plasticky than the previous model. I don't know if I'm imagining it, but I mean the old model was plastic too, but this, I don't know, something about that just feels a little bit lightweight. I've dropped my old AX33 twice onto stony ground, and although I've messed up where the tripod plate goes onto it, the camcorder still works fine. I have to say I'm not sure this would survive the same treatment. It feels a little bit lightweight. Never mind, let's move on. What have we got here? Zeiss lens, 20 times optical zoom, over the previous model's 10 times optical zoom. That is quite some substantial improvement. And the lens assembly here is a few millimeters longer than the old one, so that the whole camcorder is actually a few millimeters longer than the old one. Not a lot, but just a few millimeters. You've still got the control ring on the front. You can choose to do focus with that, or exposure, or what's the other thing, zoom you can do on that, and you toggle through what you want to do by using a combination of pressing and holding this button, turning that, pressing it again. It's a bit of a faff, to be honest, so by the time you've selected the thing you probably most want to use, perhaps focus, you may well end up leaving it at that. Underneath, not a lot. You've got your tripod shoe hole there. On the side then, flip out touch screen, about the same size as the previous model, I think, and obviously it does all the usual tilt and flip. On the inside, loudspeaker, flip out for the HDMI, which of course means you can plug in that lead and watch your videos on the telly. This door is different on this model. On the old one it would actually flip out and stick out of the camcorder, but here it just flips flush, which I think is probably a better idea. Power on off button, a night shot button. It does have an infrared night shot mode like the old one. That button puts you into playback instead of record, and then this one at the top is supposed to somehow cancel out any sounds coming from behind the camcorder, such as from the camera operator, and only record the sounds in front. But every time I've tested that on Sony camcorders, it really doesn't work terribly well, so I wouldn't bother with that. Battery compartment here, obviously, a viewfinder which does pull out and yet does tilt, but no eye cup, which is a huge disappointment, especially if, like me, you wear glasses. You do need some big eye cup here to block the light out, so that's fairly hopeless. There's the little diopter adjustment on the side there. Oh no, does that not want to go back here? Go on. Start stop recording button, power charging indicator light, there's the DC in. This camcorder is not only slightly longer than the old model, it's fractionally fatter as well. That socket there, which takes the power from the charger, on this model it's horizontal. On the old model that was vertical, and the whole thing was very slightly slimmer. Nothing to worry about, I wouldn't have thought. Turning to this side then, you've got NFC for pairing with your mobile phone. This slides aside, giving you a microphone jack and Sony's what they call a multi-shoe, which is a kind of USB variant. You'll notice there's no headphone jack here, and I remember when this camcorder was first announced, people were outraged and saying, how is there no headphone jack? What are Sony thinking of? And don't worry, there is a headphone jack. They've simply moved it, and it's now under here, and none of the early publicity shots showed it because this strap was getting in the way, but you have still got a headphone jack under what must be the most flimsy and likely to break off little cover ever. That is not going to last long. I give that a week, but there you go, you do still have a headphone jack on this camcorder. What you've lost on the previous model, there was a little flying USB lead here which you could use to charge up the camcorder. So if you're taking the camcorder on holiday, maybe you're going in a motorhome or a boat or camping or somewhere that doesn't have mains power, you might have a solar or USB charger and you could just plug that little flying lead in. This doesn't have that, and I'm quite disappointed. I'm in a minority, I think, in that I liked that feature and I do actually use it because I live on a boat. But apparently you can use this separate USB lead, plug it in there and plug it into a USB source, and it will still charge over USB. So you haven't lost the functionality, you've just lost the included lead. So that's okay. What else? We've done the front, haven't we? Yes, the 20 times optical zoom, Zeiss lens. Should be good quality. That, I presume, is a remote control. It's either a remote control or it's a little light for the night shot. I'm not entirely sure. On the top here, button to toggle it between video and stills mode, because it will do stills, and it will do stills while it's in video mode actually by pressing the photo button. There's your zoom toggle. Under here, it's a hot shoe, Sony's proprietary MI shoe. So if you buy Sony accessories, I don't know if you can see the pins down there, but it will supply power and take audio in through that. You can plug in like an XLR microphone accessory and things like that. Otherwise, just plug in normal top lights and microphones and wire them in through the jacks here. Then front, 5.1 surround sound microphone. I tell you one thing I notice about this grill seems to be thicker than the old one, which might bode well for wind noise reduction, because on the old camcorder you could see the microphones through the grill, and on this one I can just see grill, so perhaps it will do better at wind noise reduction. So improvements then in this over the old model. I've already mentioned a 20 times optical zoom instead of a 10 times. The other big improvement that I'm quite keen to try out is that this camcorder, as with the previous one, comes with the BOS system, the Balanced Optical Stabilization System. And again, when it was announced, due to the way Sony had printed their press release, there was some speculation that the BOS on this wouldn't work in 4K mode. It was simply bad writing on Sony's part. You do get BOS in HD and 4K on this camcorder, but if you're in HD mode, the camcorder uses the extra pixels that it would otherwise use for 4K but isn't, to give you an additional level of stabilization on top of BOS. So it should be absolutely rock solid, I hope, when filming in HD. And for me, filming on a boat, boats wobble quite a bit, having a good stabilization system is quite useful. Let's just open that up. If you've never seen BOS before, once it's switched itself on, it should snap the lens. There we go. And now, as you move the camcorder, the entire lens and sensor are on a little gimbal. So no matter what you wobble the camcorder, the lens stays steady. And it is a fantastic stabilization system. But couple that with a digital stabilization as well, which is what Sony have done on this in HD only, sadly, but that's for reasons of pixels. And it should be absolutely mind-blowingly superb. And I will do some tests, obviously, and show you the results. So, we've got the zoom, we've got the stabilization. The pixels is down. 16.6 megapixels is fewer than before, but it's better because they've reshaped the sensor to actually be 16:9 aspect ratio, and they're using all the pixels on it, whereas previously they were doing a sensor crop. And what that means is the pixels can be bigger on this, apparently 60% bigger, so it should be better in low light to some significant degree, I would imagine, if the pixels really are that much bigger. And again, I will do a test directly comparing this with the old model in low light. We'll see how it does. I'm looking forward to that. And I believe this can do 4K time lapses, which the previous model, to the best of my knowledge, could not do. So I'm quite looking forward to doing some 4K time-lapse, even if I then scale down to HD and pan across the time-lapse as it takes it. It could do some really beautiful footage like that. That's about it, I think. We've talked about the different sensor and the different lens and the enhanced stabilization, and it should shoot slow-mo in HD, and it's got the 4K time-lapse as well. So I will now go out and shoot some test videos with this, do some comparisons with the previous model, and I'll post them up on the channel over the next few weeks. Any questions, leave them down below. Thank you, as always, for watching. Cheerio.